All right, so in addition to a bad example, I wanted to give you a really good example of what an evaluation would look like. So I'm going to start as always with a screen share, and we're going to go here. I'm going to be flipping through a couple of screens because there are some items I haven't done yet. One of the things you'll notice I haven't done, and I had to minimize just so I can see the top of mine, is I haven't added in my page numbers yet. So we're going to go to Insert, Page Number, top of the page, and I want plain number 3 because that goes on the correct side. And then I'm going to put my last name. And you'll notice that that put the page numbers all correct. I don't have to mess with anything. It's going right where it needs to. And now I can go into my paper and we can make this nice and big again. There was something else I didn't do, and that's I didn't set a very important item called the widows and orphans. So I'm going to highlight everything. I'm going to go to paragraphs and see this right here, widows and orphans. I need to deselect that and click OK. And that gives me my perfect 23 lines per page. I also need to make sure that in the paragraphing, I have 0 and 0. Sometimes that after is set to an 8 and it makes your alignment off. So make sure you have 0 and 0. All right, so I'm looking at this. I have my perfect MLA header. Note that the MLA header is in the document. It is not in the header, it's actually in the document. I have a unique title, New Theories for a New Age. And I have a nice introduction here. So I start by telling you what the title of the article is. I tell you who all the authors are. And then I tell you why this is important specifically. And for my final project, it's important because I plan on teaching appreciation of literature. I actually have a class now, and this article meets the criteria and expectations for my final project. And then I go on to explain how this meets the criteria. So I talk about the timeliness of it, and I include Kairos right here with the currency. So this is my area for currency, and I only have Kairos once. That's all I need. I have it again here because this one's also to do with Kairos. And I touch on explaining a little bit. This is where some of your summary comes in, but you have to elaborate on some of that as well. And some of my elaboration included personally. So I personally teach both dual enrollment classes, which have only high school juniors and seniors, as well as on-campus students who are still considered young adult, which is said to be up to approximately age 23. When considering this aspect of time, so I looked at time differently, and it's okay to do that. You can look outside the box. You can go above and beyond. So when I look at this aspect of time, specifically, that means that the article is specifically targeting the age group I work with, and the Kairos itself is relevant to my project and will enhance the instruction. So I'm using some of that ethos, pathos, Kairos language. Speaking of relevance, the topic, so I used that relevance to transition into my next one, and I talk about relevance, and I talk more about relevance. And then I go into the author. So you see how I have multiple paragraphs per section of the CRAP test. And with that, I'm including this language, ethos, pathos, logos, Kairos. And so here the authors of the piece increase the credibility of the article with their credentials alone. And then I talk about their credentials. And then I have a separate paragraph where I go in depth about their credentials. And that's a pretty big paragraph where I even use quotes. And then I take that, the level of authority leads me to examine the accuracy of the information presented. So I know now that they're credible, but what about the accuracy? And so I look at their logos, and see I've got that right here, logos or information. And they not only provide a list of trade books, but they also have a vast amount of resources incorporated into the article. And then I explain about how long the article is and how for this length of an article, you would expect 24 sources, 24 pages, 24 sources. And so I'm looking at that level of balance as well. And the authors went about 3 steps beyond and then had 65 sources. And yes, I actually counted out how many sources they had. And that means they have a balance of about 3 sources per written page of content. Well, that's a really good balance. And then I go on to examine their information even more, and I examine the kairos, or timeliness, of their information. So I'm getting really in depth, and I'm really evaluating how well did they do with this source. And I move from that into the final aspect of the CRAP test, which is purpose. And this is to encourage teachers and college professors to incorporate a new form of literary theory, the youth lens. Because this age category is relatively new to our vocabulary, the article does make sense on why it's not been taught before. And then I go into some of the details that they gave about how most literary theory was started in the mid-1800s, which is the same time that the category of teenager or young adult was brought into the language of the English language in the United States. However, I have a little devil's advocate here. And that is where there could be potential bias. And I do recognize there could be potential bias. And the bias comes from their credentials. Isn't that ironic? So all of the instructors, while experts in the young adult literature, are biased for the very same reason they're credible. They only focus on young adult literature. So one could say that they're trying to make an argument to make their field more relevant as a way of enhancing their credibility. But even with that, I went ahead and I said that this would be a good article, and I said why this would be a good article for me, for my project. This is a very personal evaluation, and it really does speak to my final project, as should yours. Now, I have my works cited, and the reason I don't have it here is because I wanted to do a new share with you. This is my academic library for my personal classes that I am currently taking. And I went ahead and I looked up the article. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click into this. And every library is a little bit different. But one thing is the same. When you find an academic article in the online library, it will always somewhere have this option to cite. And if you look here, it gives me all these different methodologies. I want this one right here, MLA. Okay, so I'm gonna copy that to my clipboard. Depending on the college, you may have to do just a copy and paste. Mine's really cool. I've got this. And I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna go back to here and I'm gonna paste. And now I've got some formatting to do. There's a little bit of an issue because it didn't put it where it should have. So now it's up where it should be. I know it's all correct, except there's no hanging indent. For this, you may have to go to layout to find your ruler. Oh, let me minimize for just a minute so I can see the top of my screen. Yeah, it should be somewhere in here. Your page setup. You may have to play around to find it. But you want to be able to see your ruler. You may have to Google search how to do that, but definitely be able to see your ruler because that's what I'm going to use to show you how to do this. So we're going to go back to home. So right here, this tells you where your stuff's lining up, and it should always line up between the gray and the white. The gray is your margin and the white is your paper content. You'll notice you've got one over here that tells your typing where to stop. Gray, white. So make sure those are set. But for the hanging indent, you have to kind of hover, and you're going to take this in 1/2 inch. And after you've done that, you have to come back and you have to grab the top. And that's just the first line, and you have to take it back, all the way back between your gray and your white. This is your hanging indent. you have to have a hanging indent on your works cited. So you'll notice it's double spaced and it's got that hanging indent. I know I have everything correct on MLA because I specifically went and found what I needed to make sure that I had all of the correct information. Now, what if you're using a web page? I'm so glad you asked. If you are using a web page, I want you to go to this website right here. This is scribbr.com. All right, this is got citation tools. So it's got, if you pay for a subscription, which I don't recommend, you don't have to do that. You can do the proofreading, you can do the plagiarism check. What I want you to use is this right here, citation tools. It also has style guidelines here. So if you have a class that's requiring APA, it has that for you. We are going to use MLA, and we want to do a citation generator. So here we have everything we need. And yes, you can see I use this quite frequently. It'll even allow you, if you've got a hard copy book and you need to cite that, you can look up the citation that way. Let's go ahead and take a look at a website. So if we're wanting to use a website, you would enter in the URL and do a search. As I don't have one readily available, we're going to go ahead and go to a book. And right now I only have the title. I forgot my author. So then it pulls up all these different options for you to click into. And oh, I recognize this cover. This is my book. And now it has filled in everything I need. The only thing that's missing is the place of publication. And so I can come to my book, see, same book, same cover, and I can look for my publication location. And this one just says published in the United States. And then I'll cite. And there we go. There's my citation. If I click on it, it's copied and then I can paste it. And the really nice thing about the Scribbr is it also does the hanging indent for you. Like, I don't have to do that. It actually does it. So great, great tool for you to be using. All right, I hope that this good sample has been just as helpful as the bad sample. I'm going to include a copy of my good paper so that you can kind of glance through and see what it looks like. There's a lot of I statements. There's a lot of this is how it's going to help my paper. There's a lot of this is what I think, and that's okay because it's an evaluation. And so it is your thoughts and it is your I thinks. It is your this is what I believe about this article and this is how it will help my paper. So keep that in mind as you're writing. And as always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, please let me know. Thanks so much.